Welcome to episode 48 of the AMT podcast. I was meant to put out an episode last week, but work kind of got in the way and I was feeling a bit under the weather, so apologies for the delay. It's a really busy time on the trading calendar. The French Open wrapped up last week. Now, I don't trade tennis. I don't have the time, but I love the sport. I used to go Wimbledon every year. Anyway, I had to snoop around the markets, and I noticed Carlos Alcaraz was 4.0 to win the French Open in the outright market. And this was somewhere around round 4, which I thought was just unusually high. If any tennis traders out there have any idea why his price was so high, I'd love to hear it. So leave a comment below. Anyway, by the time we got to the semis, Novak Djokovic pulled out with a knee injury. So he went as short as evens. And then as he got to the final, he touched 1.5. So he was the heavy favorite against Alex Zverev. And then he went as short as 1.2 after the first set. So I was sitting very nicely, but there was just so many breaks in serve in the final. He ended up 2-1 down at one point, and he was nearly back to 4.0. So all that hard work was pretty much undone. I'd already removed maybe a third of my liability at evens, but I removed a bit more at 4.0. It was just too nervy for me to be involved at that point. But thankfully, he went on to smash him 6-1 and 6-2 in the final 2 sets. So even though I made a tidy profit, it ended up being around half of what I should have made had I not got greedy. But no complaints. You know, honestly, anything outside cricket, racing, or golf or boxing is just a bonus for me. So I'll take that. I genuinely think Carlos Alcaraz is going to be a real banker for traders in the outright market over the next 10 to 15 years. So I definitely look forward to backing him in many tournaments in the future. And it's about time the next generation of players were ushered in post the Nadal, Djokovic, Federer era. And that really looks like it's happening now on the back of Djokovic's injuries. Father Time is finally catching up. You know, about over the last 5-10 years, the world really thought they were bracing themselves for that takeover from the likes of Nick Kyrgios and Tsitsipas, maybe Dimitrov and Medvedev, who in fairness has won a couple slams. Despite how talented these guys are, they lack that same grit, which we see in the likes of Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. So I really think that those two guys are the ones to be the torchbearers for the sport going forward. Anyway, it's the World Cup right now. In the cricket, it's the 2020 World Cup, so that's taking up a lot of my time. There's been a lot of low-scoring games, so it's been a complete 180 from the IPL. It's taken a really different approach from a trading standpoint. And literally in a nutshell, I've just been laying teams batting first, and that's paid off pretty well. We've seen so many short price favorites like at 1.03, 1.04, going out to evens or and above routinely. We've seen it, in at least 2/3 of the game. So it's turned out to be a good strategy so far. Like I said, it's taken some adjustment. It was really difficult in the beginning, but things are panning out nicely, and hopefully can make around 4K, off the tournament. So less than what I made off the IPL. But like I said, it's been a big adjustment. The IPL is on every year. You got a lot of data to go off. This has been a lot more difficult to trade. So things have been good so far, but I'll post updates as the tournament ticks over. As for last weekend, it was the US Open in the golf, which I was trading side by side with the cricket. This was the hardest US Open, not only for the players. The USGA were really set out to catch these guys out, and probably rightly so after that birdie fest at the PGA Championship in the last major. But it was also the hardest tournament that I've traded in a very long time. It was actually impossible to call a winner even after 4 rounds. It came down to the very last shot of the last hole for Bryson DeChambeau. Now, I was onto his price from around halfway through the tournament. I also tipped his price to a few of my old subscribers in my Telegram, and I was sitting on a really nice position. But that was until Rory McIlroy went on an absolute birdie rampage in the final round, where he finally got hot with the putter, which we've seen missing from him in final rounds in majors over the last few years. So he was finally holding those mid-range birdie putts, and he ended up with a 2-shot lead at one point. And with the last 2 holes being really difficult closing holes, it looked like he was home and dry. Bryson was just spraying his tee shots everywhere, and it didn't look likely that he was going to make up that 2-shot deficit, but it turns out he didn't need to. I closed my position on Bryson, and I ended up hammering Rory's price, only for him to bogey the last 3 of the last 4 holes And that, that's probably the biggest choke I've seen in the last 12 years since Adam Scott bogeyed the last 4 holes consecutively in the British Open to throw the tournament away and give it to Ernie Els. So I absolutely did not see that coming. There were just so many flips in price. It was really impossible to make any money. And I did rather well to get to 500 up at one point, but I ended up 150 pounds down. There's just nothing I could have done, so, and like I said, it's especially frustrating given, what kind of profit I was on at one point. But like I said, it was impossible to call a winner right until the very last shot. But one thing I did do differently this tournament that I haven't done before is I used a bit of data to assist my trading. So I've been playing around with what's available. Now, I'm not starting from a completely blank state because I am pretty good at reading the state of play, but rather I'm looking for the data to confirm any preconceived notions that I may already have. So I'm looking for the data to either add weight or solidify my opinions. But if the data is scarce or doesn't point clearly in either direction, then I'll potentially disregard any opinions I may have, or at least reduce my staking depending on the price. So I'm really looking to tighten up my results. Like I said, I've got a pretty firm grip on things already, by reading the state of play and just going off what I know. The same way I do with racing. But the biggest challenge for me using the data is to not lean too much into it and totally disregard what I'm seeing, because there's no right or wrong approach when it comes to trading. But what you must do is at least be clear about what you're doing. You can't mix and mash things together. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So like I said, for me personally, the goal is to just try and uncover potential patterns or angles. And if they confirm what I already forecast to happen, then I'll potentially bet a bit more aggressively. Or if the data is scant, then just ease off things. And when I started looking at the data, my idea was that I was going to automate strategies to build set and forget methods and passively generate profit over the long term. Now I say passively in quotation marks because no method is truly passive. Even if it's automated, it still requires constant monitoring and maintenance and fine-tuning in light of new data. During lean periods, you always have to question whether or not it's just a dry patch or whether your edges run out. So it's an intense process in and of itself, but basically requires a very different approach where I'd essentially be starting from scratch, since it completely removes the human element to trading, since it removes the need for in-play race reading ability. In a nutshell, it turns trading into more of a mechanical process than an art. So that sort of starting over just wouldn't be suitable for someone like me, because my profits would have to come to a grinding halt as I'd be starting from scratch. And I can't afford to go months or even years of experimenting all over again. And if I did make it work, I'd have to micro stake before scaling up, which could take months, or like I said, even years before it bears fruit. And having traded for many years now, I know that no method or strategy truly holds weight until it's been tried and tested over the course of several seasons. Edges tend to run out with time, and like I said, they require constant fine-tuning and refinement. There's a lot of detective work and experimentation and elimination through trial and error, which is such an exhaustive process just to potentially match what I was already making trading manually, or best case scenario, marginally improve my profits. So where I'm at now as a trader, the time isn't worth the effort. So yeah, I can't afford to completely start over from a blank state and wait months or years to get back to where I am right now. So the risk just isn't worth the reward for me. If you're starting completely from scratch and you want to take a data-driven approach to automate, then great. It's going to take you a long time to be profitable, whether or not you learn it manually or doing it through data anyway. So whichever approach you choose, I can only assume you have the time to do so, which I don't. Now, I'm not completely averse to automation, but it's more of a side project for now because I'm already profitable. I have a good enough understanding already of race courses and golf. And the beauty of that is that unlike the data and the odds which evolve with time, race courses stay the same. The gradient of the course, the stiffness of the fences, the going of the track, the sharpness of the bends always remain the same. So understanding a racetrack and knowing how to pick your spots and pick signals when to lay or back horses in specific zones on a race course is almost a rinse and repeat method that will stand the test of time. The homework only has to be done once. So I'm using data for racing and for golf in order to single out or point out horses or players whose prices tend to move in repeatable patterns. And then if it ties in with what I'm seeing in play, then I'll trade accordingly. So let's look at a few examples. Now this data is from the previous day's racing, and if I'm looking for horses to lay, for example, then a potential angle is to look for horses whose in play minimum price hasn't fallen by more than, say, 10% of the starting price on average. So what that would tell me is that this horse rarely ever steams in play, so it's rather uncompetitive. And then from there, I'd look at the horse's previous runs and whether or not it's run at today's track, is it up or down in class, and just measure it against the rest of the horses to gauge or determine whether or not it's going to do the same thing on the day. Or if I'm looking to do a back to lay, I'd have a look at the horse's dob percentage. Now, dob just means double or bust. So how many times has the horse halved in price? And what's the cumulative result of dobbing this individual horse? And again, is it up or down in class? How short is the favorite? What prices did the horse previously trade at? There's so many ways to slice and dice the data. There's so many angles to uncover. I'm just pointing out a few relatively straightforward ones. This isn't me giving away any sort of strategies. It's a lot more nuanced than that. You're going to have to put in the work. But essentially, all I'm doing is narrowing down horses that show consistent price patterns in play. And so far, I've managed to dig up a handful. Now, I haven't traded a lot of racing over the last couple of weeks since the cricket has taken over, so I don't have a big enough body of results to prove that I'm onto something. But so far, I honestly feel like the dispersion of my results is tighter. I'm picking my spots a little bit more carefully with the data, and there's definitely edges to be gained even as a manual trader. So essentially, what I'm aiming to do is to couple or marry the data with the race course or golf course knowledge. So I'm not leaning totally on the data. I'm just using it, I'm just using the numbers in the background to provide clues as to which way the prices are likely to move before they happen. Basically taking a middle ground sort of approach. A delicate balance has to be struck because it's very easy to use the numbers and say, this is a guaranteed lay or back. Then it becomes very easy to fall in the trap of trading what you want to happen instead of what you think will happen. So that's the only real risk of using the numbers. I'm still trying to be objective as possible. I'm just looking to spot clues to assist my manual trading, at least for now. If it turns out the data pulls out a string of results, that net me a profit over a longer term period, then I can look to automate strategies. Whilst in the meantime, I can go about my manual work so I can still earn as I build a catalog of results. Like I said, it takes time to see how a strategy plays out. There's a lot of tweaks that have to happen in the meantime. So we'll see how that goes. A Royal Ascot would normally be a good starting point to start sharing results. But at first glance, liquidity looks to be down massively, which is a real shame. And we've touched on the reasons why in previous episodes, so we don't need to go over that again. And there's no point complaining about it. This is the way racing is now. So it's just something you just got to get on with. But I'll definitely keep you guys posted and let you know how I get on. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.